Hi everyone, I'm Florence and a proud library donor as well as a volunteer on the Literary Circle Committee. I'm so excited to be here and want to thank you all for joining us. Welcome to the Toronto Public Library Foundation's first author-to-author virtual conversation. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the Toronto Public Library is situated on the Indigenous land and Dish with One Spoon territory. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Toronto Public Library gratefully acknowledges these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land. Tonight we're in for an entertaining conversation. Before we begin, let me say how impressed I've been with how the Toronto Public Library is making a difference in our city, particularly during COVID-19. TPL provided free Wi-Fi connectivity kits to those without computers and data connections. They quickly pivoted from in-person programming and services to online resources, and just recently learned that the TPL's customer service team has been calling elderly library customers just to check in on them and make sure they're doing all right. I've never been more proud to be a library supporter, and if you want to know how you can help, I encourage you to get in touch with the team at the Toronto Public Library Foundation. I'd also like to extend a sincere thank you to all the library donors who make TPL a priority on your list of charities. You are making a difference. Now, before I turn the screen over to Natalie and Phuc, let me share a little bit about our special guests. Natalie Jenner is the international best-selling author of the Jane Austen Society, a fictional telling of the start of the society in the 1940s in the village of Chawton, England. She worked in the Canadian legal industry for many years and once ran her own independent bookstore in her hometown of Oakville, Ontario, where she lives with her family today. Phuc Tran wrote the critically acclaimed memoir Saigon, a moving tale of displacement and assimilation. Phuc was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and his family immigrated to the United States in 1975. He lived in New York City, where he apprenticed to be a tattooer while teaching Latin. Currently, he lives with his family in Portland, Maine, where he owns Tsunami Tattoo and works as a tattooer. Without further ado, welcome Natalie and Phuc.
Natalie, I am such a fan of your book. And for those of you who have not read it, do you want to show us the book? It's Jane Austen Society. I adore this book so much. I wish that I'd read it over the summer, but that's okay, right? You wanna pass it my way?
Yeah, I'll pass it your way.
All right. Oh, what? Oh, thanks. All right.
There you go. But I need one of yours for my pretty shelves now.
Okay. I got you. Okay, here. You ready?
Yeah.
Better than email, folks. Oh, look at that. Here we go. Ready?
Okay, ready.
Yep. All right.
Perfect.
Magic of technology.
Two of a kind. We've never met. We should let everyone know that we've never met, but we have bonded as debut authors. Yeah, at a later stage in life, because I was doing the math when I was reading your book, that you were born 5 years after me, and therefore you were sort of 7 entering the 80s, and I was 12. So we essentially did kind of grow up. I mean, obviously, if you were a more precocious adolescent than me, we grew up together through the 80s. And I think, like, anybody will love your book, but I just ate up all the cultural references. It's brought back so many odd memories. I'm having nightmares.
Having nightmares is a great segue to my asking the first question, which is tell the viewers a little bit about your trajectory as into your career now as an author, right? And I think both of us have had unconventional trajectories, I would say.
Yes, I think both of us have had our debut author novels and memoir published in essentially middle age, and that is not necessarily the norm, but it's becoming more common, partly because I think it's just so difficult to crack the industry. I'm very different from you. I had many different careers, but was trying to get published alongside those careers. And so for me, I always wanted to be a novelist, not a short story writer, not a screenwriter. I wanted to be a novelist. I wanted to create a world, 300, 400 pages. And I wanted to do that from the time I was about 3. My mother said, like, she said, the minute I was aware of books, I wanted to do what those people were doing. And when I was 30, I wrote my first novel, and I spent a good, more than 10 years writing constantly every day, sending it out to hundreds of agents around the world. And it wasn't ever my time. It just, I think it's a question of the muse. I always say the inspiration meeting the muscle. And I think that I had the muscle, and I was developing, Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. I was doing the exercising of the muscle, and I was building the intuitive ability to understand narrative and plotting and all that stuff. But I think the inspiration wasn't quite right in terms of a story that would resonate with as many people as possible, which is what publishers obviously have to keep their eye on when they're going to invest. Because now you and I know, as our next career, this is a 1.5 to 2 year journey with a book, from the time, it goes out. So for me, I decided I want to be a writer from the time I was really young. And I'm so thrilled it's happening now. And I'm so curious about you, knowing with a memoir that you're having to decide what part of your life you want to write about, knowing that in high school, like me, you were a voracious reader and in love with literature and studied, I think, the classics at university. I studied English literature. And I guess I wanted to know from your perspective with your career development as well, how long ago did you harbor a dream of being a writer? And when did you first put it into action?
Oh, right. It's really funny. So in my senior year photo from graduating high school, I forewent all the little, you had like this little black and white photo, and you could put in all your little
goals.
National Honor Society or whatever. And I decided, I think I was feeling very rebellious at the time. And I said, I'm not going to put in any of my accolades. I'm just going to put in my dreams. So I put in a quote from Oscar Wilde, and it said, someday I'll be a writer or a dramatist or a poet. I'll be famous. And if I won't be famous, I'll be notorious. That was my 17-year-old self speaking, obviously. So I think like you, I've always loved books. And I went off to university to study English, but then took a detour into the classics. I think I wanted to teach more than to write. I felt so much pressure to read. And I loved reading, and I just thought if I spend time writing, that just takes away from my time to read. And selfishly, I just thought there's so many great books to read, and we'll never read them all. And I guess I'm excited to die knowing that I've read as many as I could possibly read. And I guess writing means that I'm just contributing to that pile a little bit, as you have too. But yeah, so I ended up teaching and then having a career in tattooing. So not writing at all. And then I gave a TED Talk in 2012. I'll fast forward. And then in 2016, I was approached by a literary agent who asked me if I was interested in writing memoir.
Oh, that's the dream. They came to you.
Right. I mean, yes, I feel very lucky, right? And I think that you and I could talk about this at length, right? About the industry, the publishing industry, which I think is very different from the avocation of writing. That sometimes like the timing is not right, and the world or the industry is just not ready for your work. And those rejections, they're not invalidations of how good your work is. It just means that like they're looking at it as, is this a viable investment that we can make money back on? And sometimes like I think their guess is that it's not. But anyway, we don't have to get
into it. But I agree that they're two very separate things. And I think that for a lot of writers, especially young writers, or even people thinking about now in middle age, or older, pursuing it as a craft, is that what I would say is they are so separate that you can't let one determine the other or vice versa. And so for me, when I wrote my first book, I was like, I'm 30, I wrote a book, where is everybody? And I didn't realize that lots of people are great writers. Lots of people are writing great books, but this ultimately is a business. And that the lawyer in me, having a corporate law background, because that was my career, and then I was a career coach in the legal industry, knew very much about the business side. But I really did think I was producing books that, were, for me, highly entertaining, but also a form of literary therapy. So that nothing I did was ever a waste, because when I wrote, even though I wasn't writing memoir like you, when I wrote, I was always learning about myself, even if afterwards was when I looked back and I went, oh wait, when I was exploring that issue or when I had that happen to that character, I was sort of working through on a very deep level, but in a really fun way, in a creative way, some of the things that I'm struggling with in life. And this book is that in spades, which is interesting, you know, with a memoir experience. I guess I would like wonder for you, when you decided to capture your life, some parts of your life story, did it also help you work through, obviously, things that you hadn't worked through yet?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, you know, and I'm going to say no, but only because I had done such intense therapy and counseling in my
Yeah.
30s. I will say that, you know, writing for some people stands in as proxy for counseling, you know, like in some way, some measure. But I think if I hadn't done counseling and therapy in my 30s, I wouldn't have been in a position to write with as much insight, I hope, and empathy for my parents and for myself, but also honesty, right? Like, you know, that just, you know, I mean, I think like counseling and therapy is confronting, like, you know, sort of your darkest places and impulses and being able to name them, right? And so writing also does that very thing. And I just want to amplify what you said, Natalie. Like, there is so much incredible wisdom in your book, and there are like so many like razor sharp sentences, and they're so good. Like, I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about it. Anyway, do you want to talk about your hurdles into like,
Yeah.
I guess, tell me you started writing in your like at 30.
So I start writing when I'm 30 and I get a book done, I send it out, and then I have a baby, my wonderful daughter. And we might as well share with the audience now that we both bizarrely named our oldest. I have one daughter, you have two. Our daughters are both called Phoebe, which is, mine is from Catcher in the Rye. So
Yeah.
everyone thinks it's from Friends, but it's not. It's Holden Caulfield's kid sister. But in the freak of all freaks, when my daughter read the book a few summers ago, she said, you know, you gave me the kid's same middle name too. Like, how uncreative are you? Yeah, so I gave her Holden Caulfield's sister's entire name. It was very odd. But when I had my daughter, I took a bit of a break. And then the day she went off to junior kindergarten, I was with one child. The first time's always the last time. You know, I was like, that's it. And I went to the deli counter at like Loblaws, and I was just like so sad. And the woman said, no, now it's your time. What is the thing you've always wanted to do? And I think that resonates right now with the pandemic as well. People's time is different. For some people, it's so worse. And for other people, it's looking for distraction and trying to think about things they want from life in the long term when things do feel uncertain. And I went straight home that day. I started writing, and I never stopped. And then I wrote most days after that.
And what about the books, like being a bookseller? Like, did that happen in there as well?
Yeah, the bookseller happened after I quit trying to get published. So I took a 10-year break from trying to get published. And the opening of the bookshop was, I love books so much. Like you worked in a library when you were young. I wanted books to be a bigger part of my life. And I wasn't feeling that the magic was going to happen with the industry. And I was okay with that. I had my own consulting business and I had the time. So I opened this bookstore and it kept me close to books. So, you know, I think for me, the biggest hurdle was finding the time when my daughter was young. But then after that, there was really no hurdle. I became very kind of diligent. I'd be curious to know about your process. I write every day, kind of the same time, not every day, but when I feel like it, and around the same time, because what I would share with people is I do believe you can train your creative subconscious mind to kick in at a certain time, especially for the parents in the audience. It's sort of like at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, my brain is going with my stories. How about you? Do you have a routine at all?
That's so interesting. Yeah. So I mean, I think I was working 2 jobs. I was teaching during the day, tattooing at night, you know, I had kids at home. So I was on what I call like the boa constrictor diet of writing, where I would write every other Sunday, but like, so, but in the intervening 2 weeks, so I would only write 2 days a month, but it would be like
all day,
10-hour stretch, and I would bang like half a chapter. You know, I love that you said that about like training a creative mind, because I'll say this, and it was such a surprise to me. You know, there were days when I just didn't feel like writing, like I'm tired, you know, and, but I knew that, you know, I only had 2 days a month allotted for, I would force myself to go to, you know, the library and sit, and I would produce like great, you know, like good work. And so like, that was really shocking to me. Like, I would come home at the end of the day, and, you know, my wife would be like, oh, like, how, you know, did you get any pages done? And I'd be like, actually, like, No, so I think like even if you're not there, like just pushing yourself to go through the motion of writing.
And also to recognize when it's not going well, because I think part of it is that sense of when it's going well, you're lit up and you're engaged is when you should, aim for, like the zone in sports, right? So you're sort of aiming for that. And when you're there, you maximize it if you can. And then in the other times it's not there, it's okay. You'll edit it out later. But you won't get those moments of the zone if you don't show up enough, That's how I found worked for me. Yeah.
And do you think that, like, for both of us being, can I say, sort of like mid to late career writers, like I feel like I have so much wisdom that I did not have in my 20s. Like, I can't imagine what the pressure would be like to get out of undergraduate school, go get your MFA. You graduate with your MFA at like 23?
23, 24, yeah.
Who knows, right? Like, it's a 2-year program or whatever.
Yeah.
But and also like like I'm just so happy to have lived a life, like had kids, had a career, like sort of, had, got in trouble, got out of trouble, like those sorts of things.
I lived vicariously through you in high school when I was reading your book, let me tell you. No, but I agree with you. People ask me and I'll be like, you know what? Everything happens for a reason. I was not meant to get published with those earlier books. Because people ask, I mean, this is my 6th book out of, I think, 8 now. People will say, are you going to go back to the well, and get them, out of the drawer where they are? And I'm like, no, they served a purpose in helping me learn how to develop the talent and the muscle. But they were getting me to this point. And this is the book that I'm so glad got published first. And this is the book that I am so glad I get to talk about all the time because I love Jane Austen so much. And I love just talking about people, finding hope and having a lot of characters to discuss. It's so much fun. And so it all worked out for me. And I think for you as well. Like, we were able to live these full lives. And I do think that not for everybody, but I think for a lot of people, a lot of the wisdom that we're trying to share with people has come from our own harder life lessons. Sure. And I did not have that mindset when I was in my 20s. I was fortunate to not have had the distance or the pain to the degree that I experienced later in life, with my husband's medical diagnosis being, a large reason why I wrote this book. So we both have come from sort of like these traumatic sort of experiences. And the books are a way of using literature to connect with others, learn about ourselves, and also kind of like instill hope. Because I think, don't you find as a writer that what we're trying to do is share a message, but also kind of help energize people a bit, right? And that they get so engaged by what you've shared with them, and then they go out and share themselves. And I find that's a really wonderful, like, the fan emails you get, that part of the journey. Like, it's this wonderful feeling of having touched somebody.
Yeah, the connection, I think, is so much a part of sharing stories. I mean, I think, and the community that develops around reading, right? And love reading, love of books. I think that's so incredible. What do you think about, the idea, like, the sort of like the rough earth that we have to, sort of, hoe as writers, right? Like, it's not easy work. And I think, when I asked you, like, you already have finished your, like,
yeah, it's in with my agent. That's why I'm so stressed. I feel like I'm like on submission again. And like, a couple days go by and my family's like, don't bother him. Like, they like us either like, be cool. And like, it's hard to create in a vacuum. I don't share my work with anyone. Halfway through, I give my manuscript to my husband.
Okay.
And that's the point at which he can say, no, stop, babe. Like, what are you doing? He's got that one chance and he loves it. Then I just keep going. And then when it's done, I tidy it up and then I give it to my agent. So, but I was reading in your wonderful acknowledgments, which I love your acknowledgments to your book, talking about Sue, your wife, and how like every word, and just like, I feel I have that same input. And sometimes, do you find that's enough? Just having one person that you trust?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, like, and I think maybe we might be anomalous in this because, like, I like talking to other friends who are writers, like, they have like writing groups, like Algonquin, sort of round tables where they bring their work and share it and they're workshopping it. And I think I was just so busy, like, I didn't have the time to sort of being in a workshop and being on that kind of a schedule. But and also I think there's like, for me, it was important, I was very much aware of this having too many cooks in the kitchen, as it were, having too much input. And I knew that, there was going to be an editorial process and my agent was going to, have feedback for it. So and I think with memoir, it just felt so personal that I wanted the person closest to me to read it and have feedback for me. But beyond that, I didn't have anyone else read it. So your husband,
sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Your husband is your frontline reader?
He's always been. And so I trust his judgment. If he likes it and my agent likes it, I kind of know I'm pretty home free, which I love, because I'm wildly superstitious when I write. I want it to be, my characters drive the plot. I don't outline. I don't know what's going to happen. I had no idea when I started. I had no idea that there was going to be a servant girl.
You didn't outline that?
No, nothing. So I got surprises. And then I hope that when the reader's reading, they're like, whoa. And like, it's like, that's how it felt for me. And it was wonderful. It was such a high. So yeah, I want to keep it very organic and authentic, and very much just my characters just tell me what they want. They just show up on the page and I follow them gleefully, and they're in control. One thing I want to ask you about advice for people who are listening to us right now and they're thinking about, gosh, I've always wanted to write either memoir or fiction, and I'm at a stage where maybe I have time or the will or the interest. And I was wondering, what you thought would be great advice for them during especially a pandemic in terms of thinking about trying this as a possible path.
Yeah, I think I would love to amplify a little bit in our conversation or the comment that we made earlier about I think writing is one thing, and then sort of like breaking into the industry, like the publishing industry, I think is a different thing. And those then circles overlap, obviously. But, I think about it like playing music, right? And then it's sort of like, it's one thing to like learn an instrument and play music and, to enrich your soul and for entertainment. And, there's so many sort of beneficiary sort of effects to playing music, right? As I think there is to writing. It's another thing to be like, I'm going to record an album and get it out there. And, like making it big in the recording industry and as a musician is not the same thing as learning the piano and playing the piano. So I think, it's tricky. And it's a conservative and very conscious industry, and so it's not, is that fair to say? Like, no.
It's very fair to say. But I think also, I don't think either of us would be like the last people to discourage anyone, because I think we both have learned so much through just the act of finding the time to write and the commitment, right? The commitment to the page and the showing up. It gives you fortitude and it gives you discipline and diligence, which were qualities that I think as I went to U of T in Toronto for law, as well as my English literature degree. And I think going to law school also gave me that skill set, which I think is why writing in and of itself is not that difficult for me, because I have that sort of diligence. And I think what I would say to people as well is, when you're thinking about making a shift with any career, but possibly pursuing writing, I'm a former career coach of 2 decades. So I always have this quote that I say to people, which is, they asked Michelangelo how he carved David. And he said he carved away everything that wasn't David. And that's what I think your career trajectory should look like, which is, your 20s, you're trying lots of different things. Your 30s, you're honing in on kind of like amping it up and making sure that you're giving the best that you can to whatever you're investing in. At some point, you should be honing in on the things you love to do the most at work, if you can, and you're privileged enough and fortunate enough to be able to. And the same thing with writing, So for some people, it will remain a hobby. For other people, the idea of creating a story that will resonate with lots of people, that's my challenge. When I write, I'm constantly thinking every word, Phuc. I'm like, is that entertaining? Is that sentence necessary? Like, am I the only one that's going to be amused by this? That is something that I've learned to do while I write. So I actually aggressively edit while I write, because I'm constantly thinking about my audience. That is a different form of writing than what a lot of creative writing can be for people. And it's about discovering for yourself what you need it to be.
For sure. And also I think, as we mentioned, like there's like a therapeutic aspect to it. So I think when, I think it's always worth asking why you're writing, because writing and publishing are just two such different things. And there's no judgment from me, certainly. If, I was talking to another friend who was working on a book, and he hasn't published it yet. And I asked him, I said, why do you want to publish? Like, like the writing impulse is one thing, but the getting published. And he said, because I want to be famous. And I was like, and again, no judgment, but like, it's important to name that like, like, I think like, when people say like, I want to be published, and if I don't get published by the big five, then, it will be a failure, which again, like, I think that's certainly one way to look at it, but, there's so many ways into the industry now, or to be recognized, and, and so many sort of like side doors. I mean, like, I think about Martin Weir, who wrote The Martian, like that turned into the movie. Like, that started out as a blog, like a free blog novel.
Was 50 Shades of Grey Twilight fan fiction? It's like, how lucky to be writing fan fiction and turn into one of the greatest, sales stories of all time. Cognizant of our time here, because you and I would, I think, just talk forever. But we're also here to celebrate libraries. Yeah. And we both love libraries so much. And I, again, was thrilled to read that you'd actually worked in one as a page, in high school. What are your sort of like fond memories, either as a child or working in a library?
Oh my gosh, my, the library was like second church for my family. It was like my father, he loved to tell my brother and me that like one of the very first things that he did when we came to the United States in 1975 was he went to the public library and got a library card, and he couldn't even speak English yet. I mean, like, he really like was, teaching himself while also, going to GED school at night while, working at a tire factory. So
having been a lawyer back in Vietnam.
Yeah. And so he came here not speaking any English, but he knew that for him, like, the library was, sort of, it was everything. Like, anything that he needed, he could find at the library. I mean, and it's, and so he took us there all the time. And I eventually got a job there, as a teenager, as a library page, putting books away. So, I mean, I think I couldn't imagine. I would, I'll say this, there's that funny quote from Cicero about, a room without books is like a body without a soul. And I feel like that about towns without libraries. I couldn't imagine living in a place where there wasn't a public library of some sort, right?
I mean, you haven't seen the main downtown branch of the Toronto Public Library, which is sort of like in the center part of an area called Yorkville. And it's such a big open space. And the thing that I always love about libraries, when they're done well, when they're done right, is this big open communal space where everybody is welcome. I feel like it's the one happy, bright, open place where everyone is welcome. There's the Bureau of Motor Vehicle License, and there's, but there's something about library spaces when they're done for the community like that. And I was talking to my daughter yesterday. We're in lockdown still because my husband is high risk, and we went down to the lake, and we live near Lake Ontario, and she and I were sitting there and we're looking at the horizon and we were reminiscing, and I was telling her I was going to do this talk today. And she said that her biggest memory was walking by the lake on our way to the library and getting a bag of books for her when she was little. Ironically, the library she's talking about is exactly my age. It was built the year before I was born. It's what I grew up with. And now it's where I took my daughter as a child. And so my memories of it are very intertwined with my growing up and with my family life, because when you become a parent, Phuc, don't you find taking them to the library, it's so fun and exciting.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, and the excitement that they get from, looking at a book and trying to guess what, sort of adventures lie in those pages is just amazing.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
And I just want to say, like, and having worked at our, my town's library, like knowing what we expect of librarians is just incredible, and now, in the 21st century, like, we expect librarians to not only be, sort of like these, guardians of information, but like they have to know like IT, and they have to know computer and resources, and then also like they're dealing with like mental health issues, and like it's really kind of incredible. I mean, I think what we expect of librarians is a lot, and the list of things that we expect from them is growing. So I think that they're incredible.
Yeah, I know. It's sad when you hear about the cuts, especially I think in England, they've been really struggling, financially, with a lot of libraries being closed down. And I'm just so grateful. Toronto Public Library System, I think, is the busiest public library system in the world. And I know as a Canadian, I'm so thrilled that you're visiting us here from Portland, Maine today, which is wonderful. So what about you for 2021? Do you have any exciting plans that you can share with us?
So I just, yeah, I mean, I'm doing some rough drafting with about, yeah, I think my eye is on some more nonfiction, probably memoir part 2, just because like that piece of it doesn't seem quite as interesting to me, but we've got some plans. I am also interested in fiction, but I think I might be working on 2 separate projects at the same time. We'll see. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Look,
Yeah.
is there anything you can say about your submission?
Yeah, I'm not supposed to, but I will.
No.
I call it a scoop. It's like, ooh, so big news flash. No, but I'm really excited because it's going to, this is very confidential, it is going to continue the story of Evie from the Jane Austen Society. And it takes place in London, England, about 5 years after that plot. So if people do end up reading the book and enjoying it, they will get to follow her adventures. And it's set in a bookshop in London. So another place where I could just, as a former bookshop owner, I could just totally re-immerse myself in a world that I love as well and know so well. So now we had some great donor questions that we were going to get to. So somebody asked, and we sort of maybe covered this a bit, but I do think we should kind of try and give one single line answer. What is the number one piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to write a book for the first time?
So I'll go first. I'm going to steal my advice from E.B. White, who says that anytime you write, ultimately you are writing for an audience of one. Yeah. That is yourself. Yeah. So I think that will always lead you to a place where your writing is most authentic and true to yourself, so that you're not writing for all these different people in your head. But it was good advice.
That's great advice. It's actually very similar to what I often say, which is, and I believe it was Tony Morrison who said, you write the book that you most want to read. And the corollary of that was, like you said earlier, read everything great that's out there. And then when you crap out, you can start thinking about, contributing. I, in my arrogance, felt like I was ready at 30, but Toni Morrison wasn't ready until she was 38, so, and who was the wiser?
And she was still editing books, right? I mean, she was still.
She was. Yeah, she was. She was editing. She was a single mom of 2 little boys. But I think that's what you do. I think you think about, so for me, I wanted to create a story about a group of people talking about Jane Austen. I wanted to interrogate the texts a bit, but I also wanted to create a world that I felt some measure of control, because we're going through a murky medical diagnosis time for my husband. So, I wrote the book that I most needed to write, that I most wanted to write, and that I was most inspired by. And that is why it's just been a total joy. And then to connect with people over the book's acquisition and its rollout, and then in a pandemic to connect all over again, really broadly like this, virtually, with people all over the world. Sometimes I'm sure it's the same with you. Sometimes you do events and there are people from all over the world, it's quite amazing. So it is the silver lining, for a difficult time. If your book, this is a funny question. If your book was put up to be a film, because I have such an easier job of it because my people are made up. But Phuc, who would you want to do you?
I think I would love Harrison Ford. Yeah,
of course.
Just roguish charm, right?
I see that. Yeah.
Questions later. Or Steve McQueen, right?
I love Steve McQueen. For me, it's actually quite easy and very surreal. When I was writing my book, there's a British actor, Richard Armitage, and he did a wonderful Elizabeth Gaskell miniseries called North and South, but he's also in Ocean's 8 and the Hobbit movies. And he has the most emotive, resonant, deep bass voice. And I heard him as Dr. Gray when I was writing Dr. Gray. And then when it came time to pick the audiobook narrator, I was feeling a little spiky. I was like, hey, what about? And weirdly, Macmillan, which is our parent publisher, we're in different imprints, but we both belong to the Macmillan family overall. They had done work with him and they were able to get to him and he said yes. And that was just, so he is my Dr. Gray. And I think just like one or two of the other characters, I do see Evie very much as Saoirse Ronan, who is so tall and elegant and beautiful now, but has that incredible, well, again, that Jo March, sort of Little Women vibe, right? Like that really.
Yeah. I cried during that movie. Oh my God, like so much.
So she would be my dream. And then somebody else want to know, what are we reading or listening to these days?
So true confession, I read half your book and then I listened to the other half because I needed to hear Sir Richard Armitage. So I may have bought it twice because I missed the audio.
I win. Yeah. He did a great job though, huh?
Unreal. I didn't realize that he could do American accents so well. And like two different American accents, never mind all the English accents. My book club just finished Tony Morrison's Bluest Eye. And we're just about to read Transcendence. So I just read.
Oh, yeah. I just finished a great book by a Canadian debut author that I highly recommend called After Elias. And Phuc, you have to read this book. It's like psychological suspense about a man whose like future groom is a pilot. And the plane has gone down, and the book starts with him falling under suspicion as having maybe crashed the plane. And it's this incredibly propulsive read, and I just loved it. It was just mentioned one of the fall books to read by the Globe and Mail, which is our national newspaper up here. So I think the other thing is when I write, which I just finished my first draft of my next book that I was telling you about, I don't read a lot of fiction. So I've been reading a lot of biographies and memoirs about bookshops, and about Daphne du Maurier, who features in my next book, and things like that. I also have been watching a lot of BritBox. It's our British, like a BBC Netflix. It's all British programming all the time. So I've been watching Bleak House on that, but also my daughter belongs to the Criterion Channel. And so at night, we've been watching a lot of old movies, and I've especially been enjoying, I think, Cleo from 5 to 7, or The Young Girls of Rochefort, Elevator to the Gallows, those types of French films from the 50s and 60s, because when you watch them, they're very documentary-ish style, and you feel like you're right in those Parisian streets. And I miss Paris, and I miss being outside in those busy cafe culture streets. And we took down a painting and got a projector for her birthday, and we show it on this entire white wall of our living room. So that's how I'm spending my time right now. It's very happily. Yeah.
That was pretty great. Super. And I think, that's right. Do you have any other thoughts, Natalie, for our viewers out there about reading, writing, being an author?
Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot of stuff. I mean, it's been great. And I can't wait to talk to you again sometime about sort of the craft, about the fact that I don't outline. And I would love to know when you made decisions. And maybe my last question for you would be, as a memoir writer, how active a decision-making process is it? Do you just write it all out and then go back and go, I need to consolidate that, or I need to take that out? Or did you think as you wrote about what parts of your story and your life? Because the book does end very distinctly. I won't say when, but it does end very distinctly after a certain kind of passage.
Yeah, it was, my book was very deeply outlined. So I think maybe even almost the opposite of yours. Although I have to say, so it was originally 12 chapters long. So we actually had to cut a whole chapter and then splice 2 chapters together to feel so lumpy of a transition. But it was I had the outline pretty deeply written out because of selling it on proposal. Like it had to be there already. So
Yeah. So that's cool. Okay. All right. Well, do you have any other questions or things you want to?
No, I don't think so. I'm very excited to see what happens to Evie. She was my favorite character, so I'm really excited that she's.
I had so much fun. It was just wonderful to be back in that world again, but in a very different world. So, because for me, what fiction writing is creating a world where I don't know what's going to happen, and yet I feel like I have a little bit more control than real life. And if things are going a certain way, I kind of know I can aim towards resolution happy. I can get them to their happy ending. Because I do, you will know with my book, it's notorious for happy endings galore. Someone called them finals happy in Brazilian Portuguese this week. I love that, finals happy. But that's a Jane Austen trademark as well. And I do feel that both our books, what they're really about is finding hope, learning about yourself, and owning the real parts of you that are difficult to acknowledge, and then building and maintaining hope from a self-awareness and a willingness to share and stay open to the world, which is what I think everyone needs to be doing right now. Without sounding prescriptive, we're all in such hard situations, but we do have to find hope somehow. And I think both our books are, in a way, are about using literature, using libraries, and using our shared bonding with people, whether it's over skateboards or, you know, TV shows. And how lucky are we to have all this culture that we can share? And how lucky are we to have, you know, libraries as custodians of our culture?
Absolutely. And I mean, what a great segue, right, to talk about October being Canadian Library Month, right?
It is. It's Canadian Library Month, and you know, I think everyone right now is struggling and concerned about, you know, where we're heading. But these library spaces, our libraries are able to serve us virtually. They are able to do curbside pickup in different, you know, communities. Like, there's different things going on, and at the same time, they need our money as much or more than ever, and everyone's struggling. But any donation, I always say, a cup of coffee, $5. If everybody gives just what they can, that would be so helpful to our local libraries, because I do think that they probably matter, you know, now more than ever. So we want to thank tonight all of the donors and supporters that are watching and that are out in full force to support the libraries and that support the libraries the year round. We're so glad to have been included in this. And we just want to wish everyone that they stay safe and have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and hosting me, right? It's an international event, right? And courtesy of your public library. So please support him and be safe, everybody.